one of the most beautiful sights in unlimited Texas Hold'em is you got your pocket sixes, you see a flop, there's a six on the flop.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing.
When it's the door card.
It's it's the door card. Yes! I don't even really care what those other two are.
Right.
Okay, so you flopped your set, right? And now what do you do with it? And what I see a lot of people doing is being deceptive.
Yeah.
Okay, because I flopped a set and nobody can see it.
Right.
In everybody else's world, it's just a six on the flop. In my world, it's my gin card, right?
Big secret.
Yeah. And so I see them check call on the flop and check call on the turn, and I'm gonna surprise them, and I'm gonna spring the trap on the river.
On 6th Street.
Yeah, on 6th Street, right? When you get a hand that's a monster and sets are monsters, you wanna build a pot. The idea is not to surprise an opponent into paying off a smallish river bet, or to extract a small bet out of somebody that has second or third pair on the river.
Or goad them into a small bluff.
Or goad them into a small bluff.
Right.
The idea is to find somebody that has a decent hand, or even a very good hand, that's worse than your set. Right. And build a monster of a pot.
Yeah, totally.
Now, the problem is that sometimes they don't have a second best hand. Okay, and this isn't like video poker where you get a bonus just for having a high quality hand. Right? You have to actually find somebody that's willing to put money in the pot with a worse hand. And that requires a parlay. So first you have to get your pair, then you have to flop a set, then you have to find somebody that has a second best hand. Right. But when you get those three things aligned, then you get that trifecta. Well, now you've got a monster. Okay.
But this goes back to your initial point. You do need all those things, but then you still have to bet.
There's essentially two possible board textures. We can talk about dry board textures and wet board textures. If the flop comes King 7-3 rainbow, and you flopped a set of sevens, I think it's fine to go slow on the flop because it's too much to ask somebody to have a very strong hand. Now, of course, if your opponent has ace king and they're prepared to get a lot of money in, then you should just decloak right then and there and start building your pot. But the other time to build a pot is what we call a wet board, where there's a lot of draws available. Okay, so if there's a flush draw on the flop, or there's a couple of good straight draw possibilities, if you get like a Queen 7-6 flop or a Queen 8-7 flop and you've got a set of sevens, there's all kinds of straight draws and gut shots and everything that people can have. That's when to take the gloves off and go after it.
So what you're saying is, in general, is bet the wet boards and maybe not bet the dry boards.
Exactly.
My approach is when I flop a set, I almost always play aggressively. And my view is that, so if I flop the sevens and it's king 7 deuce and somebody else opened, if they have a ace king or king queen, then by me betting, I just guarantee that we get as much money as possible in the pot, however it slices out, right? If they have, let's say, queens, jacks, or 10, so they have the under pair, you know, I come betting out. Well, maybe some of the times they fold there. I kind of let them off the hook. Maybe if I had checked, I would have got more money. But a lot of times I still get paid off, you know, especially if the board has any kind of wetness at all. You know, let's say the board is king 7-6, right? If there's some chance that I do have a draw, if there's any wetness to the board, I'm going to bet because a lot of times when people do bet out of position, they do that with draws more than top pairs and sets, generally speaking. So that's a little bit naturally deceptive. But I'm not afraid of them folding. That's the thing. It's like I'm going for the jugular all the time.
I think that's something that I would really like to emphasize here. Is that there's going to be times where you flop a set and you don't get paid.
Yeah, or you bet, specifically, you bet. This is the complaint I get from my clients all the time. I bet and they folded. I know I should have checked. And I'm like, no, they didn't have a hand you could bust them with. Too bad. You need two hands to build a big pot.
Right. And that's this whole trifecta. You have to get a pair, you have to flop a set, and then somebody has to have a second best hand.
So another key reason why I bet out with my sets and I raise with my sets and I get aggressive with my sets early in the pot is because sometimes they lose. And if the stacks are deep especially is when I'm more likely to get aggressive because I want to figure out when I'm beat. So I'll give you an example of how that works. So let's say I was the opener and I flopped my set and a guy donk bets out of position into me and the board is King 7-6, and I've got 3 6s. Okay. Well, and no matter what happens, if we're still in on the turn, I'm looking for the hands that would complete an open-end straight. My spidey sense is on high alert for the hands that can beat my set.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons I get aggressive early, is because then I'm going to get really good, accurate information later if I get beat, or I'm already beat, and save roughly half my stack usually when that happens, right? Rather than just, okay, I've got a set, I'm going all in, that's it. And I think that I optimize my sets by not slow playing them. That's another thing is that it depends whether or not it's correct to play aggressively with your sets depends on how you play the rest of the time. If you're a naturally aggressive player, which I am, then you are balancing your ranges, your post-flop ranges, by playing the sets the same way as you would play your draws, if you play your draws aggressively, for example. So you have some cover there if you're that type of player. They're not necessarily going to put you on a huge hand just because you're betting. If you are the type of player who tends to freeze up when you get a set, and that kind of goes to another mental part of this. I think a big reason why a lot of people underbet their sets at low stakes has nothing to do with a pre-planned strategy. I think it's a deer in the headlights result to just seeing that set. And it's like, oh my God, now what? Check.
Right.
That's what happens.
Because, I mean, I think it really goes back to people fearing they're going to lose their customers, right? I mean, this is so exciting. I really want to get paid off, and I want to get to that right now. They don't suspect a set. They're much more willing to think that you have a draw.
Right, because they can beat that.
Because they can beat that, right? Than that you actually did, in fact, flop a set. Which means that you can get away with being aggressive because they don't put you on it. So it's the best of all possible worlds. You're piling a bunch of money in the pot and they think they have you beat. On the flop, people are willing to gamble it up with their good draws and their top pairs where they think they're protecting against a draw.
Exactly.
So let's say that the flop is ace queen 7 with a flush draw. And you've got a set of sevens and you check and he's the pre-flop raiser. And he bets his ace king or ace jack, or in a perfect world his ace queen. And you check raise him. And he's like, I'm never giving that flush draw a cheap turn card, and he 3-bets you or he shoves or whatever it is because he thinks you're on to the draw. Boom, all the money goes in and you're way out in front. And of course you could be check raising with your flush draw, so it's a legitimate concern on his part. But this is where you really make all your money because you have an extremely strong hand that's extremely well disguised. Let's say that you're in the big blind with your pocket fours and 5 people limp,
Okay.
you check,
Right.
and the flop is queen 8-4.
Okay.
Okay. Most people check here.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a mistake.
I agree.
Because, okay, let's say it's a 1-3 game. So there's 7 of you in there. There's $21 in the pot, right? Everybody's like, oh, I check. No, you don't. You come out and you bet because you've got a set and it's time to build a pot. And I would bet $25 or $30 into that $21 pot. Because if somebody's going to call, they're not paying attention to the fact that that's greater than the pot. So they're going to be very indifferent
Right. If they've got
to
a
your
straight,
bet sizes there.
yeah. If they have a straight draw or flush draw or top pair, they're coming for 10 or 25.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is that when you bet 25, now they call the 25. Well, now suddenly there's 70 in the pot. Now you're getting ready to aim for serious money on the turn and river.
Right.
They don't
And
care.
the other thing is, in a flop lotto hand like that, as so often happens, everybody checks the flop. You know, when it's heads up or whatever, the straight draw or flush draw might bet because they have real fold equity, whether they think in those terms or not.
Right.
But when there's 6 people in, the third person who has the flush draw and the next person has the straight draw, they're all checking, just hoping to see a free card. That's one more reason to bet out into those big multi-way pots. When you flop a set, think big. Go for somebody's stack. Hey people, send us some hands. Ask some questions. We'll be happy to field them on the air.
And be sure to click like and leave a comment. Thanks a lot.